Hello, and welcome to Alter Reality. I guess this is our first episode, so we'll just do introductions as we go along. My name is Candace. I go by Vampire Kitten online, and I go by VK. That's it's easier. Just VK is what I usually go by. So you're going to hear me referring to myself as VK probably throughout the entire duration of this series.
My name is Matt. I also go by Malicious Sniper, and most of the gaming community that I hang with calls me Mac, based off of my RP character. So I'll be referred to as, Mac or Malicious, or very rarely Matt.
Yeah, I almost never do username. I'm terrible. I'm sorry. It's awful. You don't call me Candace either.
No, I refer to you as BK unless I have to explain something to somebody.
Right? It's so weird. We're weird. Anyway, welcome to Alter Reality. This is our new podcast. This is something that we've been talking about doing for the last year. And I'm really excited. I'm also nervous because it's been so long since I've actually done a podcast type thing.
Get it together.
I know. I gotta get it together. When am I ever together though? Let's be real. When I start my streams, almost always something is broken.
Yeah, you're not wrong. But here we're going to be kind of going over games in general. We do have a community that has a lot of RP players, so we will be going over base RP, just guidelines, maybe to kind of help people out, move them forward so they can progress with realistic RP and not just, your cops versus robbers RP.
So, Malicious, Mac, Malicious Sniper, What is your background? What is your history here? And I guess we should probably talk a little bit about that first, and then we'll kind of go and segue into other things.
So, I'm an 80s baby. I grew up on lots of video games. I have an extensive variety of my video games. I work full-time as a truck driver. I also game a lot. Also, we put a community together, and we just work on that.
Can you tell us a little bit about this community that we've kind of just how I guess we did kind of just meet online randomly one day and got along really well and started, I guess you kind of joined me after, tell me your experience. How did we meet? How would we go about meeting?
So I had a group of friends that found your stream on Mixer back when it was around. We saw the server. We came in. We kind of explored our options there. I enjoyed the server. Things happened. People left. And I kind of stuck around. And as we kind of RP'd together, we grew a friendship. And we started working together. We started deving together and just working on a community as a whole. That was the biggest thing that we've accomplished, is just putting together a wholesome community where it's not just about the RP. It's not just about one thing in particular. We're trying to branch out, and we're trying to get people together to do different games and just mesh well together.
So right now I guess I should introduce myself a little bit. I do stream pretty much, I don't know, 3-4 times a week now. I run a small business, and when I started Fate Roleplay, it was called Covenant Roleplay. I'd like to say that we're in a really good spot now. I mean, gaming communities as a whole can have their ups and downs. We both know, we've both been in gaming for years. I'm also an 80s baby. My first gaming system was a Commodore 64, so I've been gaming literally for freaking ever. I wanted somewhere for people to go that they felt comfortable, where they sort of belonged or felt like they belong. I wanted kind of a whole family sort of, I guess, community. It's hard because gaming communities are so detached, right? They're never really, people don't know each other, and I sort of wanted to cultivate a community that where people like knew each other and wanted a game together. When I started this server, I started with a couple of other people, and it's changed a lot. We've been doing it, what, 2 years now?
That is correct.
Prior to that, I was on a different FiveM server, and I just didn't like that I felt like nobody was listening to me. And I sort of felt like people were targeting me because they didn't like me. And it was like Mean Girls, right? It sort of felt like a popular kids crew group situation where you know every FiveM server that you go into and you're like, oh, the staff's all friends, blah blah blah, and they don't care about anybody else but themselves. It's all cliquey. I didn't like that, and I felt really kind of cast out, even though I was on staff in the previous server that I was on. Nobody listened to me when I had any issues and when I was trying to fix things or resolve issues or tell people that people were being shitty. So I was just like, fuck this. And I sort of started my own server based off of that. And then we're here. You know, obviously we've had some really shitty people come through from time to time, but I still continue to do this and want to do this for the people that are currently in the community, because those people actually I care about, you know, like I genuinely care about these people.
I mean, I look at it this way. When you come into a gaming community and you bring a group of people, usually you just hang out with those group of people. We are trying a different approach on that. We are trying to let everybody get to know each other outside of the RP community, because we are not our character. You know, whereas, yes, things may seem clicky, but that's just the way it runs. You can't sit there and look at things and go, well, why would this gang treat us this way? Well, that's RP. That doesn't mean that they're going to treat you that way outside of the RP scenario. So we're trying to approach it a little bit different. We have some sandbox games, Valheim, Minecraft, 7 Days to Die. We're trying to grow that so people can actually game together and actually get to know the person behind the character. Because
Right.
your character is just somebody you have made into something in RP. That does not mean that is your personality outside of RP.
Right. And I think that where we started versus where we are now is a wholly different experience. And yeah, renaming it to Fate, I feel like we all kind of found each other and like fates brought us together, you know, sort of thing. And I thought that it was such an appropriate name when like the whole community sort of did their little vote on what they wanted for the community. I think it worked out to be really great and in our favor, because I do feel like Fate has brought this like kind of group of individuals together that may not necessarily feel like they fit in anywhere else, or they feel like their RP is a little different from other servers, or they have like personal issues where they're just not socially comfortable with things. And I think it's really important that people feel included in almost anything, which is why I think the sandbox servers actually are a really good idea, because socialization is super important. Communication is super important in these communities. It can turn not so great at the drop of a hat if people assume that they are their RP characters or what have you. There are so many people that I met that I absolutely hated RPing with, but I actually really, really do love outside of the server. You know what I mean? So I think making this more than just like a FiveM server now has just been, I think it's pretty incredible. I think it's going a direction that I had hoped it would go eventually. It just took a little too long for my liking to get there.
Well, I mean, we have to look at it this way. A lot of people grow up and they have their own, you know, like maybe a couple best friends. You know what I mean? Like very small, not very social outside of their best friend group. The gaming community gives them the opportunity to expand that just social interaction. And it can actually help them in everyday life situations. It's like going in, getting a customer service job, but barely having any social interaction before going to a customer service job. You're going to have a hard time, because you're not going to be able to read the room and get the clues that, you know, that this person that you're talking to is going to be really irritable and the things to do to, you know, de-escalate the situation. This gives the opportunity for them to experience outside of, you know, the norm for them. to talk to strangers, to gain friends, and that's going to build up to bigger and better things in their own personal life.
So let me ask you a question. Since we're kind of talking about history here, what brought you to gaming in general, like as a whole? Like what inspired you to just continue gaming through all these years? Because now we're obviously we're adults, we're in our 30s, and we're like, hey, we're still doing what the kids are doing, you know? Like what inspired you to be so heavily involved in gaming?
Well, gaming is an escape from reality. It's something that you can take a step out of your real life situation and you can put your mind to something that you enjoy doing. It's just like a person who loves to build puzzles or do art. It's kind of their vice to get away from the real world, to kind of find the serenity inside themselves. You know what I mean? Like it just alleviates stress. It makes life a little bit easier, a little bit at a time, and it's just like a break from reality.
I feel that. I sometimes like I love role playing, like I love RP mostly because I can be something else that I know that I will never be like in real life, you know? I feel like it's my sort of escape. Even if it's nuts, even if tensions are running high in like a role play scenario where it's cops versus robbers or what have you, even if it's like a really dramatic moment where a character dies and it's like, oh, the drama, you know what I mean? It's still, to me, it absorbs you and it makes you feel like you lose yourself just for a small amount of time. So 4 months after I started the server, COVID hit, right? We're going to talk about tough stuff. I'm sorry. What was March was when the world shut down, right?
Right.
And I thought to myself, how fucking lucky were we to have started something like this where people can go and escape from their own homes?
Yeah, they were locked up. I mean, people were in shutdown. Everything was shut down. You know, they couldn't go out to the bar and have a drink. They couldn't go out gaming arcade and visit with people or even go to sporting events. It was literally just you in your house with your family, your direct family. They didn't even want you to go, like they wanted you to stay home and not even visit your own family and friends. So this gave a segue into, well, I'll take my character building skills. Maybe you've done some D&D, maybe you've done, other types of role play, and take it into a GTA setting and expand on it and still have social interaction between you and other people. And along the way, you pick up new friends. It's just it was an escape for everyone who was just locked behind doors.
It was an escape for all of us. FiveM gained so many more players during, was it 2020? Yeah, 2020. I can't even, all these years meshed together now. They're all just garbage. They're hot, flaming garbage.
Yeah, right.
But FiveM gained, not only was it like obviously No Pixel, we have to thank for really putting FiveM on the map realistically, right? That's sort of how I found out about it. I was like, oh, No Pixel, oh, they seem interesting. I still to this day don't really watch a lot of No Pixel, but the idea of roleplay in a sandbox setting such as, I guess it's not technically a sandbox, kind of GTA 5.
It is.
GTA,
I mean,
it
GTA is kind of a small island.
Right.
It's a sandbox-ish, but I mean, it's quite big for what it is.
I feel like it's more of a sandbox for us because of what we do with it versus what GTA originally was meant to be, I guess. I always had a fascination with that, though. Like, I know I'm kind of segueing a little into something totally different. I always had a fascination with GTA as a whole, right? Because you have to think about it. The amount of programming that obviously goes into it and the size of it and the concept of it overall, and even the stories, Rockstar's done something incredible. I've been following GTA since 3, and it just gets better and better every single time.
Right. It does. So, like, just the vast amount of stuff they can do on this small island. Technically, is I mean, compared to other games like Skyrim and these vast, huge, like maps, they've done a lot with. Because I mean, literally, you can drive around the GTA map in a matter of minutes. Not so much in other games. Uh, but what they've been able to do with such a small area and the in-depth storylines they can make, actually pretty incredible.
It really is. And I think probably one of my favorite parts of it is I'm from California. I'm from SoCal, and I love Los Angeles. It is one of my favorite cities in the whole wide world. And I just think it's really cool that I get to play around in things that are inspired by like California culture. So I think it's really interesting. You know, like Mirror Park is obviously Echo Park, and there's Hookies is inspired by a bar in like San Jose. I think it was like a mermaid tavern or something like that. So they're all obviously like, you know, the Chinese theater was just, even Hollywood Boulevard is inspired by, what is it? What's the main road? Over by Pacific Standard. What's that road? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's obviously supposed to like be Sunset Boulevard down in that area as well, like in Vinewood. Like, so right. The fact that it's all inspired by like Los Angeles culture or even California culture, to me is really cool, because it's just like, oh, this is just like home, you know? It's just like home.
They just shrunk it down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They really just shrunk. They took the unique spots and they shrunk it down to a. It's kind of still in the same place per se, but it's just shrunken down onto a smaller scale.
Sort of. I mean, yeah. Just considering it had to be crammed into such a smaller, like, sized area. All right. Anyway, so we're getting off topic. Let's go back. So COVID hit, and I thought to myself, wow, I'm glad I started doing this, because what a time to actually give myself something to do at home and bring all of these
forced to be there.
Right? And bring all of these people along for the ride with me. And it sort of felt like I was doing something for people that was outside of the ordinary, because, you know, we all had to lean on each other during those times, right? Obviously. And there's still all sorts of stuff going on, and they're even talking about canceling events and new shutdowns happening, blah, 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 so on and so forth. But we still have this. This is our escape, and I'm so very lucky to have found the people that I have found that I can consider friends and family now because of this game.
Right, and I mean, it also branches out on giving people experiences that they normally wouldn't do in real life. Normally, like, maybe you don't like the idea of being an officer because of the danger. An officer of the law has a very dangerous job. Anything can turn at a drop of a dime. It gives you the opportunity to put yourself in there and play an officer, and just kind of get the feel of how life as an officer will be.
There's
also the same thing as gangs and stuff like that. Like, consciously, you're not going to go out there and be in a gang. But you know what? Maybe you want to adventure that kind of role play. You know, it just kind of you can kind of do things you normally can't do in real life, and that's a great thing about it.
So there's also the people that physically can't walk or do things,
right?
That they can go and they can kind of explore and do things that they would normally be able to do physically. So I think that's also kind of an exciting thing. I think that's just exciting for roleplay in general, like even D&D. There are people that physically can't do a lot, but it is a sort of tool that they can use for their own enjoyment and entertainment. And I think that's pretty cool.
Right. I mean, you get to, in D&D, you get to go out and play with magic. Well, guess what? You're not going to be able to cast a fireball in real life. But this is something that you can do just in imagination and storytelling and character building. Very important when you go into any sort of roleplay type game to have a background, to have, character building in general, because when you have those 5 other companions with you or that group with you, you kind of get to pick your own personality and how your character will respond to things. And that makes it much more dynamic than just everything being on rails. Like, and you had to play a certain way.
Right.
That's the great thing about role play in general.
So I think this is a good kind of opportunity for us to go, hey, why did we start this podcast? Why did we want to do this? And I guess it comes down to us sort of wanting to give our community a little bit more insight to the things that we do. But it's not necessarily going to be all just FiveM or roleplay. It's going to be other things as well. Like, we're planning on talking about some really interesting topics that are like space or gaming or even some paranormal stuff that we like had learned about, or dinosaurs or whatever. We're going to talk about a lot of different topics here. And I think that's kind of why we came up with the name Alter Reality, because we want it to sort of make you not only take you outside of like normal life, but also make you think about things that might not necessarily be your reality. Does that make sense? Hopefully that does.
It does. I mean, it gives us an opportunity to not always talk about the biggest things being talked about in your current life. Because I mean, there's plenty of podcasts out there for that. I mean, you can just go find them anywhere. But we want to give you like the opportunity to hear from us about events in gaming, maybe a certain game. We all play like Dead by Daylight. We play GTA, RP. We play, Valheim, Minecraft.
We just started
just
the Minecraft.
All these different things.
It's going to be really cool. At the end of the day, we're just going to talk about a lot of really probably obscure topics and gaming stuff. And we'll just sprinkle a bunch of like weird things in. So that's the goal of this podcast. We just thought it would be, I mean, I kind of twisted your arm a little bit about joining me, didn't I?
Not really. It didn't have to do too much.
You're like, hey. It was more like, hey, you want to start a podcast? 1 year later. Hey, do you want to do that podcast now?
Right? I mean, here we are almost 1 year later, actually doing it.
Right. I was looking at my notes today, and the last time I did a note about this podcast was on 1/29/2021. It's been almost a year since we started talking about this.
Well, I mean, our idea behind this is we're hoping that people wanting to get into the RP community will maybe take some notes. There's a difference between role playing and then serious role play. Serious role play is story building, character building. Your character has a whole story. I mean, a lot of my characters have stories going 2 years back or more.
Right.
So, like, you just want to help people, like, understand that if you can ask yourself this question: what is your character doing? What are their goals? What do they want to become ultimately? Like, are they pushing to become a mobster? Are they pushing to become a street gang leader, or police officer, EMS, whatever? These are the things you have to ask yourself. And you have to ask yourself, like, what is my character story up to this point? And if you can go back and you can tell yourself a story about what your character's been through, then you're doing a good job. You're doing exactly what you should be doing: character building and story building.
So I think it's interesting that you're kind of mentioning a little bit about what people want to do in roleplay, right? So a lot of people want to get into roleplay, and I don't think that they quite understand the process that it is to create a character. And I think it's important that people really think about their like backstory. I have a lot of characters that don't necessarily have a backstory. Sarah ended up being a character that I had started as a clone of another character because I wanted to try her out on a different server. And then it ended up becoming sort of a character that I didn't intend on her becoming. So her only backstory was she was a cab driver and she was from Liberty City. That was like her only backstory for a while. What is your process going into creating a character?
So my process is I have to think of a backstory, even if it's a small backstory. If you go into a lot of RP servers that require whitelisting, they will ask you, what's your character's background? If you give them a solid background and you understand the rules, more than likely you're going to get a whitelist. The best thing to do is to come up with a short background with some detail, even if you can make an extensive background. Like Leroy, one of my other characters, has an extensive background. It goes all the way back to his life as a hitman in the mob from where he was from. Mac kind of happened because a server that I was in did not allow business owners to own businesses while being a criminal. If you get caught with a big enough crime, you could lose your business. So I kind of tore Mac and Leroy apart a little bit, and I made that Mac, who was going to be in a mob family.
Isn't it always interesting that the characters that you don't intend on really, I mean, things are always changing. Things are always so fluid with your, like, so you could have an idea of what you wanted to do. For example, I knew what I wanted for Amber. I always knew what I wanted for Amber. She was this like social media sort of icon, this very like newscaster, Paris Hilton type. But in the last year, she's sort of become one of those like, not, they come off as fake, like new age gurus, like the Crystal Girls. So like that's kind of the direction that I sort of have gone with Amber, and it's different from what I originally intended on her, because before she was like really luxury, and now she's just like peace and love. It's kind of interesting to see the evolution of the characters, and it just happens just organically, and I think that's really cool, because your choice to actively tear Leroy and Mac into two pieces is really interesting, because if you look back at how Leroy could have been versus what Mac is now, it's a really interesting dynamic to kind of think that that was just one character prior.
Right. And like with Leroy, he still has his tendency, but he's very calm from what he used to be. You just kind of throw around how your character like acts things out and performs in certain scenarios. As soon as Leroy became a business owner, he kind of chilled out because he was known. Like he worked a lot with police officers, everything else like that, doing mechanic work, upgrades, and everything else like that. So everything just happens organically. There's always going to be something that can change your character's direction or alter just who they are as a whole. But as long as you have some sort of segue to get there, you're making that story. You're building that character into the story that's evolved around him.
Right. And so I'm thinking like about the things that you're saying right now. It's kind of making me think about people that want their character to go a specific way, and then their character totally veers off into a different path, which is a path that they didn't intend on. I think that that's okay too. And I know a lot of people, they look at roleplay and they're just like, oh, this is the direction that I want to go. But it doesn't always happen that way, especially when you have all these other people trying to do and follow a direction in their own right. So I think people get a little discouraged when their character changes and does things that they didn't intend on their character doing. As long as it makes sense for the character, I actually kind of think that that's better, because it is a storyline that you didn't even intend on happening. And sometimes those are the best ones.
Right. And, let's just give an example. You got a person who comes in, thinks that they're going to be in a street gang because that's their background. And when they get into the street gang does them wrong and screws them over. Well, next thing you know, they're at the lowest of the lows in their RP at that time. But then next thing you know, you have a biker crew that opens their arms and takes them in. Now all of a sudden your character went from a gangbanger to a biker or even a mob family, depending on how it all played out. Sometimes the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and that happens in roleplay.
And I think it's important that people like kind of take a look at that and go, well, I know this is not a direction that I wanted to go, but I can work with this. I feel like that as a role player, you should be able to work with whatever's thrown at you. I've had people were, oh my gosh, here, I'll give you a perfect example. My last server, Amber was trying to help somebody and did something really bad. Like she put a hit out on somebody, and those people that she put the hit out on told the person that that Amber had done it, and it like completely fucked my storyline with Amber. So all of these people were just being like really awful at her all the time. So she had gone from like being on top to being at the lowest of the low, and to the point where I had people telling me, you should just perma her. Like, you should just perma-death her. Perma, for those who don't understand, perma is like permanently kill off that character. So people were literally telling me on, like, in DMs and on the message board, or like on our Discord, that I should just perma Amber. Just get rid of her because she's useless now. And I'm just like, no, because A, she's my first character, and I don't really want to perma her because I don't really have any other characters right now. And B, I want to see where this goes and see how she can have her redemption arc. The problem with redemption arcs is people will badger and belittle and be shitty if they don't like you sometimes in RP or even in like real life or whatever on Discord. Because as we were saying before, gamers can be fucking cruel. And that cruelty is one of the reasons why I left my other server. However, I still use that for Amber getting her changes, and that is kind of her redemption arc, is that she is now doing things that helps people instead of hurting them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, another example is when a criminal turns good. That's happened multiple times, where you're in the criminal life and you turn around and you become something else. Like you've helped the police, or you've something happened within your group and they just shuns you, yet you go and you go somewhere else. Maybe you get a civilian job. Next thing you know, you feel more accepted there than you did in your gang. There's so many different ways that your story can go.
Right.
And sometimes it's out of your hand. If a group is going to be shitty with you, then you're not going to want to be around them. So you're going to try to find somewhere else to fit in. And when you find that, you could totally change from a criminal to being a good person.
I think that comes that okay. I think that actually I wasn't going to get into this because it kind of, I don't know, just sort of didn't really fit in when we were kind of outlining this episode. But I think it's really interesting to look at that and go, cliques can be really toxic in RP servers, which is why I sort of try to have different characters in every kind of group, because stuff like that really can mess with people. And like OOC, it's really awful being harassed. Like,
by the
really
way,
awful.
OOC means
out of character. Sorry, out of character. Out of character. I'll stop abbreviating things. I'll actually say what they are. But like, out of character, it gets exhausting being badgered for something that happened in a storyline over and over and over and over and over again. And you're just like, can this just fucking stop? Can this just stop, please? Because it's now been a month and people were still giving Amber shit. And I'm just like, okay, we haven't moved on in the story. We haven't done any progression. This is really awful. People are telling me to like kill the character off. And I was just so tired of it. And then people were just getting like OOC mean to me for something that I had done in character as Amber. And I'm just like, wow, I'm not this person. I'm not this character. Like, I'm I'm not that person, which goes back to your initial conversation about how people need to be able to socialize in a community so they understand who each other are actually, or who each other is actually, at the end of the day.
Yeah, because I mean, we're not our characters. You know what I mean? I like the fact that people can have a war in city, then turn around and play a different game just an hour later and laugh about it and compliment each other. Like we have a compliment
Wait,
players channel,
time
and they
out.
will literally sit there and say, "Hey, good shootout. That was fun."
Right.
And then they'll game with each other, and it's amazing.
Perfect example. Let's give a perfect example of how you can be just absolutely destroyed at RP and then have friends like outside of roleplay, right? So, Julian, I'm using Julian as an example because he was part of our in-server gang, our mob, our family, our like I guess we're criminal family, but not really criminal family with Mac and Sarah. But anyway, Julian was part of our family, and he ended up going and falling into a different group, and in RP did some really terrible stuff that our family didn't approve of. So we ended up like excommunicating him from our group and like marking him. What did you mark on his? I don't even remember. Oathbreaker, right? So marked, like scarred him and all this stuff. And we're still barely kind of communicating with him in RP, like as those characters. And we just played Valheim with him for 12 hours yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, and I see, and that's actually my real life friend.
Right.
We literally like marked him, and then that weekend I go and hang out with him.
Right.
Like
So,
it's not about like your character is not about what you are in the character. It's just a character. Like that's all you are. You're not going to go out there and treat that person the same way outside of the character.
But there are
Like,
so many people that this is
they
such
don't
a
know how to
huge problem.
separate.
They don't know how to separate in character situations from out of character situations. Like, I don't hate you in character or out of character. Like, I don't. I'm just the chillest person in the whole wide world. But in character, if we're beefing, and I'm going to be like upset with you. I'm not upset with you. I'm upset with your character. My character is upset with your character. And I think this is actually a really important thing. Do you know how difficult? I get that emotions are attached to these characters. And I get the tensions run high. And I get that there are real feelings. Because when you're in the moment, it's like method acting. You are in that moment. But it's so frustrating when people, I don't know if it's like a maturity thing. I don't know if it's like an emotional thing. I don't know if people just can't separate. But like the amount of people in FiveM roleplay servers that cannot separate IC from OOC, in character from out of character, just astounds me.
I think it's more of emotional. Like, let's be honest. We're all gamers. We all want to win. That's the gamer mentality, right? Anytime you go into a Call of Duty lobby or Fortnite lobby, you want to win. So they get this I want to win, and when they lose or something happens, it takes a hit on their ego for some reason. Like they think that they should have won or they're playing to win. And it takes a hit on their ego and they get upset emotionally about it. It's like, come on, guys. Like,
It's
you
so
really
frustrating.
just have to look at it as your character, not as, this person wouldn't do this to you in real life. This is literally just storytelling and character building. Like you're just going down this road of the story, and things are going to come up.
Do you think that because GTA 5 roleplay, FiveM roleplay, is so rooted in reality that sometimes people confuse reality with roleplay?
That could be, but we also have to look at it from this angle. Okay, so when you play D&D, you're usually a group of people doing a set quest. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You're working together all the time. What this role play does is it pits you against other people. And I think that's where people don't know when to separate, because you're actually going up against other people, not just the dungeon master who's throwing monsters at you. Yeah,
Right.
you don't like the monsters, but they're not real. It's a different concept of role play.
Right. And it's a lot more difficult. I don't think that people understand that D&D RP versus what we're doing with FiveM, it's really different. I've been on both sides of this, but I've played D&D, I've played Pathfinder. It is nothing like anything I've ever played before. The rule set is so different. And to be honest with you, most of these servers are just flying by the seat of their pants because they're still trying to figure out what works for them. Like, even us, to this day, we're still trying to figure out what works for us.
Right.
So it's just really hard when you get a group of people. Like, do you know how many friends that I thought that I had that I lost because they took something personal that happened in character? It's crazy to me to think about how many people just cannot separate.
So it's more of the player versus environment, which is pretty much what D&D is, versus player versus player. When you put that PvP aspect into it, people can get salty and upset. And maybe they lost their AK that they just spent all that money on. Maybe they got found, are scared of being found out by the cops, and all that work that they put in to build, they feel like they're losing it. And I think that's where the feelings come in, because you've put hours and hours and hours into this
Right.
work of building up this, trying to build up an empire, and to get taken down. I mean, the thing is it's RP. You can rebuild.
Right.
Yeah, it might take a little bit more effort, but you can rebuild, especially if you have a good crew with you. You can start doing things differently. Maybe lay low, build back up,
So
and then continue.
I think this is a really good, actually, example of people taking money, like monetary things in the server, too seriously. I think people grind and they grind and they grind, and so they spend all this time grinding, but they don't have anybody to role play with while they're grinding usually, and it's boring. Like, it's boring. And then when they go and take a risk, they lose it all because they didn't role play with anybody else. My best character, one of my favorite characters to play, actually, okay, that's a double-edged sword. I take that back. She's not my favorite. Holly Wood is a homeless girl, and I play her like a homeless drug addict. Like, she lives under a bridge. She believes that she is Santa Claus, and she is on drugs all the time. All the time. So I have to play this character in the most obscure possible way, that she can never have a home, and she almost always, like, I pretend she has no money. Turns out, people give homeless characters an exorbitant amount of money, and she's got more money than some of my business people in the server, which is crazy to me. But I don't spend any of it. Like, I never buy her new cars. She has a scooter and a car, and the only reason she has that stupid car that she has was from the Alien event, and I hate it. But, like, I think it's important that people understand that RP is not about money, and there are ways to make money outside of grinding. And if you role play with other players, it's easier to make money than to grind, even if you're just grinding together.
I mean, it's okay to grind a little bit,
yeah,
you know, and make you some money. Like, you know, maybe you're a racer type and you want to get into the racing scene. So the car that you're looking at is this amount of money, and you go and you grind up to that point to get that car.
right.
That's part of your role play.
But here's what I'm talking about, right? It's one thing to go digging for potatoes by yourself. It's another thing to go digging for potatoes and network with other people to sell those potatoes to other businesses. Or
right,
go out with somebody and do it together, and then, like, maybe find a way to like make french fries with those potatoes and go sell them out of a food truck. That there is a difference between grinding by yourself and role playing while you're grinding, because grinding by yourself sucks. And that's why we've kind of like limited it in the server as much as we have. But I just think people really need to sort of think outside the box when it comes to their grind, because instead of doing that, they could say, oh, okay, here's what I'll do. Instead of going and digging for potatoes by myself, I'll put out an ad on the classifieds and go, hey, I'll clean your house for so-and-so amount. Go and RP out that you clean somebody's house and have them pay you for it. There is so much more money in that, and it's more fun to do a grind like that versus to do a grind that's just game mechanics that were put in just because people needed something to do in their off time.
Right. The whole aspect of role playing in a GTA server is to have player interaction. If you're not having the player interaction, then when it comes time for you to want to get in there and kind of get more information from people, they're going to look at you and they're going to go, who the hell are you and why would I tell you anything?
Right.
It's good to go in there and get to know people, go to events, tag along with them, and then next thing you know, you're tagging along with different people. You get this and whitelist jobs like mechanics or TDM or anything like that.
Right.
These are ways that you can get connected with people.
I mean, we do post our events that happen in server on the Discord. Like, we use the Discord events thing. I encourage people, if there's a house party going on, there's an event going on, you know that there's something happening, I encourage people to go talk to people and step outside their box a little. Like, go talk to people. Don't be weird and awkward and super loud. Like, there's no reason to be like, I'm looking for guns at somebody's house party. But, like, get to know people and go, hey, you seem cool. What are you into? I love cars, blah, 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 blah. And just kind of segue from there. I think there's a social aspect to the server that sometimes people miss out on because they're always trying to grind and they're trying to get their car. And I get it. But if you work with other people and you do something, say, for a group or a gang, they might be more susceptible to helping you out with your car situation versus being on your own.
I mean, look at it like this. You come in, you got a piece of shit car.
Everybody does.
Work with someone, you get money from them for helping them out, whatever. You gain connections. Next thing you know, you're driving this really expensive car and everybody's going, well, where the fuck did he get that money? The social interaction is just top notch. You always want to be socially interactive with people in a GTA RP server. I mean, this isn't RuneScape where you just grind for stuff. This is literally an RP server. You need to be out there and put yourself out there and kind of just go with the flow, but have that background of what your character wants to do. Maybe you want to become a private investigator or something. So you get out there and you meet all these people and you start to hear story after story, and then you can start to learn things about people. And you can learn where people's hideouts are. You can do all this. You can maybe you choose to go from PI to undercover cop. And then you have secret meetings with the cops and say, this group lives here. I do know that they have, SMGs and AK-47s. You can kind of pass that information along. And then you can go back to just interacting with these people just normally. And that just literally pushes people's storyline because the cops get more storyline. Oh, now they have an informant. Now they're collecting more evidence. And now they can be on the lookout for this group because they're up and coming. I'm not saying go in there and just be like, oh yeah, I know all this information about them. But what you can find out in character, and if the group is being sloppy with it, that's on that group. To a point. Don't try to ruin people's RP, but be more, helpful if you're trying to be an undercover.
Right.
Like, there are undercover officers that people have no idea that they're undercover.
I know. It's crazy to me.
And all you have to do is just be out there and just be present. That can lead to so many different things you can do. That includes your sway of your story. Maybe you wind up in a biker gang because they treated you like family. And that's what your character had been missing. Maybe they were the redheaded stepchild of the family or the black sheep, whatever you want to call it. And next thing you know, you have this group that comes along and they're like, yeah, you need help with that? We got you.
Right.
Now,
And
now you put on a vest, you're rolling with the biker crew.
that sort of comes down to we have a lot of rules. I mean, obviously a lot of FiveM servers have a lot of rules, but we have one rule in particular that a lot of other servers don't have, and it's respect each other's RP. And I sort of want to explain a little bit about that because I think that a lot of people don't quite understand what that means. End of the day, when you're out there role-playing, you have to know and understand that other people are doing the same thing as you, and they want what's best for not only their character, but their story development and storyline as a whole, right? So, like, when people go and snitch on a whole gang that's just up and coming, that, to me, is super shitty. Like, it's not respecting someone else's RP. If they have been working on this project, like, to get their gang off the ground or whatever, and somebody against, by the way, this is against the rules in our server for obvious reasons, but if someone snitches out an entire gang to the cops, what kind of story is that? You have to ask yourself, what is that adding to yours and their story? A, it's going to label you a snitch, and B, it's going to disrupt and fuck up their story so far, which is really rude to me. Like, that is intentionally trying to hurt someone and is not respectful to their RP at all.
So let's look at it from this point of view. All right, so say you know information on real life mafia activity, and you go to the cops, and then the mafia finds out. What's going to happen to you?
Right.
You're going to probably wind up with concrete shoes.
But in
but
RP,
the problem with that is you can't be permanent unless it is your decision. So when somebody does that, and then they're out walking the streets later,
it's almost like there's no consequences for them, which is really shitty.
Exactly. So, like, that's where you have to take fearing for your own life. Like, let's say you do leave a gang because they were shitty with you, and you know everything about that gang. Running to the cops at the first thing and just laying it all out there on the line, you're not going to do that. You're going to try to get away from them. You're going to try to stay low, especially if they're a very prominent gang. There's ways to do it. Maybe you end up in a different gang and you kind of know the things about them. You can kind of use that to your advantage to get the upper hand on that gang that was treating you like shit.
But at the end of the day, people also need to consider, like, hey, this person is trying to do this big task. I'm not going to go over here and just fuck it up for them in one go because I'm going to just be an asshole. So, like, I don't think that people really think about others as much as they should. And that's something, like, on our server that we really, really, really want people to do, is be considerate of others. It's just being considerate. It's like not being a dick, So
I'll give you an example of just Mac and Sarah. When Julian did what he did and he got marked, realistically, Mac wanted to kill him.
Right.
But there were problems with that. Like, from an out of character aspect, if I kill him, he's just going to be right back. So I altered how I felt into just marking him. Because then that was the last bit of that RP. I closed it out with the marking him.
It was so much more powerful than just dumping him somewhere.
Right.
And it's still to this day is RP'd out. It made the most sense for the scenario, for sure. Oh my gosh, we have talked about so much.
Yeah, we have. It's been quite a long one.
It's been a while, and we just sort of wanted to, like, introduce ourselves a little bit. I know we really kind of just segued right into what we do with the server and roleplay, and we have a lot more to come. And I'm really excited about this because this is something that I've been wanting to do for a while. And I hope did you have fun? How was your first podcast experience?
It was good. I enjoyed it.
Well, I hope that we can continue doing this. And it's, obviously we've got a little bit of a learning curve here because there were some, audio issues. And listen, if everything goes 100% right, I'll be thankful. I'll be thankful. But I guess that's anything, even streaming or editing or whatever. But today, I think, was a good day. I think that's a good kind of stopping spot. We can talk a little bit more about like character building and story building and provide more examples and stuff in later episodes.
Well, it's just naturally. I mean, it's just something that's going to reflect on everything in RP. We're going to have more topics to talk about, like improving, role-playing as like EMS characters or cop characters. There's going to be lots of stuff that we're going to talk about here. And we'll go in depth and we'll try to explain it to the best of our ability on how to look at things from all sides, all aspects of the RP. And that's for the future to come, though.
So we hope that you guys had a good time. We hope that this was interesting, at the very least, for you guys. The later episodes will obviously have set topics, but we kind of just sort of went with the flow with this one. And thank you all for listening. We appreciate you, and we will see you on the next episode of Alter Reality. Bye, guys.
Bye.